Okay, so we're going to do a quick one today on the portly gentleman. These are the two men that are let in by Bob Cratchit, the clerk, when Fred leaves. So you might want to just put a little line here and let yourself know that the portly gentleman section is coming up. If you're portly, it's another way of saying you're maybe well fed, you're nourished. And that's important to remember in the Victorian context where food for some people was incredibly scarce, how do you say that word? So the idea that maybe these people are quite well fed, they're quite nourished in life, might become relevant for what they're about to ask Scrooge to do. And they are pleasant to behold, and now stood with their hats off in Scrooge's office. They had books and papers in their hands and bowed to him. So very respectful, these two men that have walked in. Scrooge and Marley's, I believe, said one of the gentlemen, referring to his list. So he has a list in his hand, and he's saying, am I at Scrooge and Marley's? Have I the pleasure of addressing Mr. Scrooge or Mr. Marley? And now Scrooge replies to these portly gentlemen, Mr. Marley has been dead this 7 years. Scrooge replied, he died 7 years ago this very night. So we learn here, through Scrooge's interaction with the portly gentleman, that Marley has been dead for 7 years. And he died, Marley was dead to begin with, he died 7 years ago on this night. And so the portly gentleman replies, we have no doubt his liberality is well represented by his surviving partner, said the gentleman, presenting his credentials. So the gentleman's presenting his credentials, so who he's there for, what he's there for. And liberality, if you're liberal with something, you're quite free with something, maybe quite generous, and we're going to see the significance of that. It certainly was, for they had been two kindred spirits. At the ominous word liberality, Scrooge frowned and shook his head and handed the credentials back. So he's like, no, well, we're not liberal. We might be exactly the same. We're kindred spirits, so we're two of the same, but we were not liberal, is essentially what Dickens is suggesting there. And the portly gentleman continues. At this festive season of the year, Mr. Scrooge, said the gentleman, taking up a pen, 'tis more than usually desirable that we should make some slight provision for the poor and destitute, who suffer greatly at the present time. Many thousands are in want of common necessaries. Hundreds of thousands are in want of common comforts, sir. So what the portly gentleman is saying here is that we should make some slight provision. So we should raise some money at this festive time of year for those who are poor and destitute. Now, if you're poor, it's quite self-explanatory. You maybe don't have many resources. If you're destitute, it's another way of kind of being outcast from society, or you're really on your knees, if you like. You don't have many resources at all available to you. And they are suffering greatly at the present time. Maybe think about the idea that it's winter and the fact that people who have so little, that's really highlighted at a time of festivity where some people are celebrating and they're really indulging in excess and having lots of food and lots of joy. It really sheds a light or makes the poor and destitute situation maybe more apparent. And there are hundreds of thousands. And Scrooge's response is really important here. So while they're saying, please, can you give us some money, basically, for charity, to give them common necessaries, so common food, drink, warmth, common comforts, a place to, sleep. They're saying, can we give some provision? Can we raise some money for these people, these poor and destitute people? And Scrooge replies, are there no prisons? Asked Scrooge. Plenty of prisons, said the gentleman, laying down the pen again. And the union workhouses, demanded Scrooge, are they still in operation? They are still, returned the gentleman. I wish I could say they were not. Now, this is important. When he talks about workhouses, we might know what a prison is, of course, where you might go if you've committed some kind of crime that might make you destitute. There's also the workhouses, which is a different thing. This is an institution, the workhouses, where you would go if you really did not have enough money to live, to support your family. Whole families tragically would end up in these workhouses where they would work in appalling conditions. Men and women would be separated, children separated from their families. Really, it's what it says. They were made to work quite menial tasks, almost punished. In these workhouses, people were punished almost for being poor. And there's some really interesting research you can do into workhouses. But this was really where you would go if you had nothing. And we see the gentleman saying, I wish they were not still in operation because they are so horrible, these workhouses. The treadmill and the poor law are in full vigour then, said Scrooge. Both very busy, sir. The treadmill, again, would be a type of punishment, type of menial task where people would, you've seen a treadmill, maybe in your real life, but people would literally be running on this machine either to generate power or as a form of punishment, as a form of intense manual labour. You can look up pictures of the Victorian treadmill if you're interested in that. The poor law, that involved moving money away from trying to give money and give resources to poor people. So trying to decrease the amount that people paid in taxes towards poor and destitute people, and promoted things like workhouses. So try to kind of solve the problem of homelessness or lots of the population being particularly poor. Instead of trying to help them with charity, it was trying to sort of put them into these institutions like workhouses, push them out of the way, and take away the stress, if you like, on taxation. So the rich stay rich while the poor stay poor, if you will. The poor law, again, really interesting to look up. And Scrooge is offering, he's saying, why are you asking me for money when these things are in operation, as he'll say here. Oh, I was afraid from what you said at first that something had occurred to stop them in their useful course, said Scrooge. I'm very glad to hear it. So the fact that Scrooge is saying, well, why can't the poor people, instead of raising money for them, why don't they just go to the workhouses? It's quite cruel. And the portly gentleman replies, under the impression that they scarcely furnished Christian cheer of mind or body to the multitude, returned the gentleman, a few of us are endeavouring to raise a fund to buy the poor some meat and drink and means of warmth. So he's saying, they don't exactly, the workhouses and the prisons and the effect of the poor law doesn't encourage Christian cheer of mind or body. So it doesn't embody the spirit of Christmas, if you like, all that warmth and jolliness, and also just being Christian, being good. So again, suggesting that these workhouses are not very nice places to be. And the portly gentleman affirms his mission. So a few of us are endeavouring to raise the fund to buy the poor some meat and drink and means of warmth. So it's this idea, we're just trying to raise some money for these people, raise some money so they can have a bit of a good Christmas, a little bit of a good Christmas. We choose this time because it is the time of all lovers when want is keenly felt and abundance rejoices. It's a little bit like I was just saying, folks, the idea of, okay, well, if you want something at Christmas, it's keenly felt, so you really feel the want. If you lack something, you really feel it, because abundance, so having a lot of something, is rejoicing at this time. So you're either living a life of abundance or extreme want. So they're trying to kind of even it out a little bit by endeavouring to try and buy some meat and drink and means of warmth for the poor. And the portly gentleman says, what shall I put you down for? So what are you going to donate, Mr. Scrooge? And we know from Fred that Scrooge is rich. He's described as being rich enough. So the fact that Scrooge replies, nothing. Scrooge replied. And the portly gentleman think, oh, you wish to be anonymous, so you don't want to let them know that, okay, you, Mr. Scrooge, have donated the money. And Scrooge reaffirms, I wish to be left alone, said Scrooge. Since you ask me what I wish, gentlemen, that is my answer. I don't make myself merry at Christmas, and I can't afford to make idle people merry. Idle's a sort of another word for lazy. So what he's saying is, I don't want to make these poor people merry because they're lazy. So he's associating kind of lack of wealth with laziness or being idle. I help to support the establishments I have mentioned, so that's the workhouses, that's the prisons. They cost enough, and those who are badly off must go there. So what he's talking about is his taxes. So when you get your wage packet, a certain amount of money goes to the government, goes to the taxes, yeah, that help run public services and things like that. So Scrooge is saying, I already give enough in my taxes to support these institutions, which are characterised as quite horrible. They cost enough, and those who are badly off must go there. So Scrooge is advocating here for these workhouses. And again, please look up some pictures of workhouses or watch some documentaries about workhouses. You'll really see what horrible conditions they were in. And the portly gentleman replies, many can't go there, and many would rather die. So showing the horrible conditions of the workhouses, that people would rather die than go and work in these workhouses. And a really crucial quote from Scrooge coming in here. If they would rather die, said Scrooge, they had better do it and decrease the surplus population. So really quite a horrible moment from Scrooge here. He's saying, well, if these poor people, these poor and destitute people would rather die, they better do it because we need to decrease the surplus population. If you have a surplus of something, it means you have too much of something. So Scrooge here is suggesting that the population is too much, that there's a surplus of people. If you want a quick contextual win, you could also talk about this idea of the surplus population and the idea that the population is too big for the resources that the country has. This would have been attributed to Thomas Malthus, the economist Thomas Malthus. We can also say that Scrooge is showing a Malthusian view. Malthusian. So this idea that, okay, well, we don't have enough resources to support the population, so the population must decrease. Besides, excuse me, I don't know that. But you might know it, observed the gentleman. It's not my business, Scrooge returned. It's enough for a man to understand his own business and not to interfere with other people's. Mine occupies me constantly. Good afternoon, gentlemen. So what he's saying is, what do I care? What do I know about other people and the poor and the workhouse conditions and things like that? He's saying, I'm completely constantly occupied by my own business. Seeing clearly that it would be useless to pursue their point, the gentleman withdrew. So now we get the portly gentleman exiting. And although this is a short, sharp interaction, it reveals so much about how Scrooge feels about other people. He just genuinely thinks, okay, well, they better get on and die and decrease the surplus population. Literally, the fact that he's describing people through these cold terms as a surplus population. These are individuals, these are people with lives, and he doesn't care. He's constantly just involved in his own business, his own wealth and his own money making. It's quite harsh, quite horrible the way that he talks about this. This is going to become relevant for the rest of the novella. So a little bit about the portly gentleman there for you.